Joining me on the program right now is Representative Harriet Hageman from Wyoming. How you doing?
I'm really good, Andrew. How are you?
10 days. We're not even 2 weeks in, and you have Democrats in the media that are all tapping their watch as if magically, every problem this country has is going to disappear.
It's been interesting to watch some of the news programs where they have been excoriating Republicans or conservatives who come on and they say, but he promised that the price of eggs would come down, and the price of eggs hasn't come down yet. And I thought that J.D. Vance did an excellent job of pointing out that the costs and the inflation under the Biden administration was largely driven by their failed energy policies. And because those energy policies were embedded in so much of the government, they often referred to it as a whole of government approach. We're going to have to work hard to rip those things out, and that is going to take time. But you can already tell there's a dramatic mood swing in this country. People are more optimistic. People are happier. People are encouraged about where we're headed. And I also just think, compare his first 10 days of activities to any president in the last 50 years, their first 10 days of activities. There's absolutely no comparison whatsoever. And they're almost caricatures at this point, or cartoons or clowns, when they say, well, my God, what has he done? Why doesn't he brought down the price of eggs? Yes, he has deported 10,000 criminal illegal aliens. But other than that, what has he done for me lately? It's just such a bizarre approach that they're taking.
Yeah. We were told when Biden was president that, we had to be patient, right? Everything was going to require our patience. Now it's like they expect it done and they want it done yesterday. Pipelines don't get built in a day. You can cancel one in a day. You can't build one in a day, right? You can rescind land leases in a day. You can reissue them, but the oil and gas is not coming out in a day.
No, I always go back to the fact, Andrew, that it takes a lot to build a business, whether you're an accountant, a lawyer, a farmer, a radio news host. It takes a lot to build a business. You have to get financing. You have to put together your articles of incorporation and your plan of action and who your target audience is, and marketing and communications and how you're heard. What kind of a herd are you going to have? Are you going to go commercial? Are you going to go for, straight Angus? All of those things, it's very difficult to build businesses. It's extremely easy to destroy them, and especially if you're the government. And that's what we have seen in spades in the last 4 years. We have had a government in place that when they walked in the first day, they never talked about building. They never talked about structure. They never talked about actually doing things to make people's lives better. They immediately started adopting policies to implement energy poverty, for example. And I had an opportunity to question Deb Haaland, the head of the Department of Interior, at one of the hearings one day. And I said, why is it that every single policy you adopt results in energy poverty? And her first reaction was, well, I'm really not familiar with that term. And I said, yeah, but it's pretty self-explanatory. And she said, yes, I understand what it means. And she said, well, we're in a transition. I said, what does that mean? What do you mean we're in a transition? So you don't even try to hide the fact that your policies result in energy poverty? You don't even care? And that's kind of where we are. And so it really is kind of a hoot to watch them scrambling and pulling their hair out and trying to find an argument when they're talking about a guy who just got done exporting or sending almost 10,000 criminal illegal aliens out of our country, making every single community in the country safer.
Yeah, this is something I think, the Democrats are not, they think they're winning. They're not winning on this. There is overwhelming support for enforcing our immigration law. And if it's one thing I will say about Donald Trump is he never spoke in focus-tested isms. He said, you vote for me, I'm going to deport people. You vote for me, I'm going to build a wall. You vote for me, and now he is the president, and the Democrats are acting like, how dare he?
It's pretty fascinating to watch, but the American public is cheering from the sidelines and saying, thank God we finally have someone who listens to us. This is a government of, by, and for the people. The Democrats have forgotten that or never truly believed it, and they look as government for the benefit of government and the chosen few. President Trump has walked in. Well, I was at the signing yesterday of the Laken Riley Act. It was very emotional. It was very uplifting in many ways. I had the opportunity to visit with many of those mothers who have lost their beautiful children. The mother of Jocelyn Nungary and Rachel Moran. And having the opportunity to talk to these wonderful, wonderful, strong women and say, we as a country are sorry for your loss, that it never should have happened. And that's what President Trump did. He stood up and he said, we are sorry for your loss. It never should have happened. We're going to do everything we can to stop it from happening again. And that's who he is. He cares about us.
I have a question. And I read the so-called bipartisan immigration bill, and we read parts of it on this program, and we noticed that there were no measures that prevented illegal crossings nor dealt with deportation. It was basically just a fast track to amnesty bill. How different is the Laken Riley Act from H.R. 2, or is it basically one and the same?
No, they're different in that they're addressing different things. H.R. 2 is actually a border security bill and has measures in there to stop the invasion as well as to build the infrastructure, both from the standpoint of what we can do digitally as well as what kind of hard infrastructure that we need. What the Laken Riley Act that bill does, though, what that act says is that if you come here and you commit a crime, we're throwing you out of the country.
Yeah.
So that you don't get to commit another crime and another crime and another crime and another crime. You steal from a store and you get arrested, we're going to throw you out of the country. You do an armed robbery, we're going to throw you out of the country, because we're not going to then let you escalate that to rape and murder, which is exactly what happened with Laken Riley, as well as several of these other victims. Those people who did it, those illegal aliens that committed these crimes, had a record. And under the Laken Riley Act, we are required to throw those horrific monsters out of our country. And if the federal government refuses to do it, states and communities can sue them for failing to do it. So, again, we've got these various drug cartels and gangs coming from Venezuela and other places. And we didn't have a federal government. We didn't have an ICE or a border patrol under the Biden administration that would do anything about it. Now, the city of Aurora, the city of Cheyenne, the state of Wyoming, if the federal government is not throwing these criminals out of our country, we'll sue them for it. And that's the Laken Riley Act. The H.R. 2 was a very, very good border security bill. That is not the bipartisan bill that everybody talks about and that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris talked about. The bill that came out of the Senate with the one Republican from Oklahoma being involved with drafting it, that was a horrific bill. All it did was fast track them, and it actually allowed hundreds of thousands of people to come into our country illegally every single year before there were even any triggers to stop it. I believe it was close to 5,000 people a day could cross our borders illegally before there was any kind of a trigger for ICE to have to act. That wasn't a border security bill. That was a process and faster bill. And anybody who claims otherwise is being entirely disingenuous.
So is H.R. 2 going to come back to the House floor soon?
I sure hope that it does. And I also believe that with reconciliation, because of the budget aspects of H.R. 2, portions of that will go into our reconciliation process as well. So, yes, we're tackling this from a couple of different directions. So parts of H.R. 2, we're probably going to part it out like you would a car in some ways, because some of it we will be able to get through reconciliation, which means we only need 50 votes in the Senate. And that's why we're going to do it that way. We have not given up on this. And I think it's very clear that the American public are demanding a secure border. They're tired of the invasion that they've seen over the last 4 years. And even before that, it didn't start with Joe Biden. It was exacerbated under him. But we know from his official numbers, according to the official numbers that Biden gave, he said that there were over 12 million illegals that came in during his 4 years in office. Obviously, we have a lot more illegals than that because they did come over and we didn't have the enforcement mechanisms that we need. Now we will. We will have them. Actually, I'll restate that. We had the enforcement mechanisms. We didn't have the backbone or the will with people who were in positions of power to actually do what they were supposed to do under the law. But that's going to change.
All right, let me ask you this, and I don't want to throw a curveball at you. President Trump has put a freeze on funding. Democrats are losing their minds, saying he's violating the Constitution. I've been saying if anybody has an ear to the Speaker or the Senate Majority Leader, maybe it's time to use the 1974 Congressional Impoundment Act and the congressional rescission, pass it quickly, and then you can claw back all that money, and the Democrats and the media can have nothing to say about it if that were to pass.
Well, I think that that's one mechanism to use, but also just keep in mind they're lying about a lot of what they're saying. What he's done in terms of putting freezes on things are not money that has already necessarily been appropriated for specific projects. The other thing that they've done is nothing is affecting Medicare, nothing is affecting Social Security, nothing is affecting Medicaid. The things that where we are required to spend money and fund programs, those are going on just as they were before. But an example of where they're stopping these is we do know that there are several NGOs who have made serious bank over the last 4 years it being part of the illegal alien pipeline. Catholic Charities is one of them. You know, I wish I didn't have to attack a religious organization, but Catholic Charities has been very blatant and very upfront, and they've received hundreds of millions of dollars helping be the pipeline to get illegals into the United States of America. You saw that Kristi Noem, the new Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, has frozen any more grants going to organizations like that. That's entirely appropriate and entirely within the law and within the framework of what was intended by Congress. So a lot of what you're hearing and what they're saying is just hair on fire stuff for the sake of screeching at the top of their lungs because they don't have any policies to address. But Biden, in fact, did the same thing. When he came in, he froze certain money for things that he disagreed with. And I'll give you a good example of that. He's the one who signed the document stopping the pipelines.
Yeah.
So what that did, it stopped any of the money that had been appropriated to the various federal agencies for permitting, for rights of way and things like that. He did the exact same thing. It's just that these people either have very short memories or they're being selective in their outrage.
Well, you know, I had looked at this and I said, I don't know what they're saying is unconstitutional. He's not stopping Medicare payments, Medicaid payments, Social Security payments, things that are authorized by law directly are not being affected. Some of these NGOs might not be happy with there being a temporary pause on what they're expecting. I don't see how that's unconstitutional. I just think as across the board, if we could just freeze it, literally stop the illegitimate spending from the last Biden budget through a congressional rescission, claw back that money before we're paying for Drag Queen Story Hour in Ecuador again or whatever it is. That's a great way to go. But of course, the Democrats are going to scare people and make them think that grandma's not getting her Social Security check.
One of the things that I think has happened, and we can both recognize that what happened last evening in D.C. was a terrible, horrific tragedy. I had, in fact, flew out just a couple of hours before that incident happened and came back to Wyoming. We're all heartbroken right now, and I was just watching a newscast and crying and in hearing how this all played out. But I think what you have to look at is when a government does so many things that it shouldn't be doing, it becomes incapable of doing the things that it should.
Absolutely.
And this is what plays out when you do that. When you misdirect your resources and your assets, when you redirect assets to Drag Queen Story Hour and condoms for Gaza, you become incapable of recognizing that you've got to keep people safe at these very basic levels.
I got to leave it there.
We've got to right-size government.
Thanks for joining us, SiriusXM Patriot.